staff here at the Wyoming Business Council, joining us with this presentation. This meeting is being recorded and we'll be posting it on our website probably later today or tomorrow at the latest. So with that being said, Bridget, I will kick it off to you and we will get started.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for making it today. Again, my name is Bridget Flynn. I am the project manager and principal analyst here for the state of Wyoming at CTC. With that, I will hand it over to Tim Moyer, who will be leading our presentation today.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oops, someone else's. If you can give me control, Bridget. Can everybody see the EHP questionnaire? Great.
Yep, I can see it.
I'm going to keep this informal. I'm going to walk you through some resources today and have a Q&A, deep dive into these topics. This is the EHP questionnaire that we developed. Think of this as kind of an EHP readiness tool. It's not a deliverable that is going to be cured as far. There is no wrong answer. You're going to fill this out. It's about helping you understand all the topic areas that you need to be familiar with, and then as a stepping stone to help you get to delivering the actual EHP deliverables or the EHP package. So I'll talk about these entries here, and I'll also kind of link it to some of the other resources that we're going to talk about, because these are all building blocks. So I want you to view it that way. One of the first question, or the first question, we want to make sure you have EHP expertise on staff. And if folks joined us for the webinar, we talked about those SOI qualified folks. Very important, especially if you want to take advantage of some of the efficiencies. This is not a layperson's job. This requires subject matter expertise and experience in this space. So it's going to be an easier path for you if you have expertise at your disposal than if you try to do DIY and do it yourself. So making sure you're bringing folks on board. And then number two is probably the first key deliverable is that detailed project description and looking at all the factors that we need to help determine whether or not a categorical exclusion is going to apply. And we're going to go that easy path for clearance, or if it requires more detailed review. And I'll point this out when we're looking at some of the subsequent resources to kind of point out, we have an EHP checklist. There are categorical exclusion screening questions that are going to be in UNA grants. And so all of this kind of ties together so that as you're putting together the project description and supporting detail, I want you to think about the end game, about what we're delivering to NTIA and how we can then review that and make sure we have a clean package. When you think about question 3, that's the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office. So you think about EHP is a combination of NEPA, the environmental side, and NHPA, the National Historic Preservation Act side. These next 2, 3, and 4 are about the historic preservation side of things. So making sure you're doing the Section 106 process, and then tribal engagement. So that's the TIPOs. And then we've got a few questions here. Number 5, it's talking about Fish and Wildlife. So you'll recall from the webinar that we talked about Fish and Wildlife's IPAC tool. So getting ahead of thinking about, as you're pulling together your project description and your documentation, that you're thinking about the effects on the environment. And so it's directly traceable to the checklist and to the ESAP deliverables that we're having for NTIA. And so keep on going through. And we've got some links here to help you kind of navigate and get familiar if you've not done this stuff before. But looking at the FEMA maps, wetlands, all these topics here. Now, this one's interesting, coastal zone. Not a lot of coastal zones in Wyoming, right? So just because these questions are at the aggregate level as far as across the country, if a question doesn't apply, then say no. But don't, when we get into the latter stuff about the stuff that we deliver, every single question needs to be answered. So the answer is no, then say no and say why, but don't leave things blank. Let us know that you're answering every question. And then as we keep scrolling down here, Again, these are all just topic areas that are going to flow through the things that you want to be thinking of, but I want you to get down here. These are some of the operational things that we want you to start thinking about early. So rights of way. And so permitting is part of this process, but it's separate. When I think about environmental and historic preservation, it's specific to NEPA and NHPA, so those governing rules. But the reality is you need to go get permits at the federal, state, local level. And so NEPA, the EHP side of things, isn't covering that. It's specific to your project, whether or not there are rights of way that you need to access, or state, federal, and local lands that you need to work with. Looking at railroads. If you've got a railroad crossing, you want to find that out early, and you want to get a jump start on it early, because railroad crossings are notoriously long. They're a challenging thing. So if you can find a workaround for that instead of doing the railroad, even better. But that's why we're queuing this questionnaire up early, because we want you to think about these things, and not just think about it and do them, but think about it. Is there a better way to do something? And so if you can avoid a railroad crossing, I would strongly advise it, because if not, that could be a long pole in the tent. I always get that phrase kind of jumbled, but that could be a gating factor for you. Making sure that and also identifying the parties. So looking at pole attachments, make ready can be timely, costly, frustrating. So identifying these things early is going to be hugely important for you. If there's existing you need to access existing conduit, identifying who the parties are, getting those agreements in place, etc. And so as you go through and complete this questionnaire, you'll deliver to us, we'll review it. We're not going to cure it. It's more about a line in the sand, kind of an assessment, a readiness assessment of where you are, and an introduction to the topics. So with that, I'm going to kind of move over to the next document here. Give me 1 second. Let me stop sharing so I can go find the other document. Give me 1 second.
And just while you're looking for that, Tim, I think I mentioned it off the top, but all these resources we will also have linked in the slide deck that you will receive after this.
So we've already shared the broader EHP guide, right, Bridget? Yeah. So what we've done here, if anybody's familiar with the comedian Nate Bargatze, he makes me laugh. He's like, books, they got a lot of words. So that guide is very dense. It's very, and just to read through it without any context can be challenging. And so what we did is we operationalized it with this checklist. And so basically the combination of that guide, I still want you to read that guide because it's got a lot of good information in it. But when you think about what the operational tasks are out of that guide, it's this EHP task list, which then again ties to those deliverables that Wyoming is responsible to provide to NTIA, but then you guys are responsible for providing to Wyoming. And so that whole process of NTIA established the ESAPT, which is their tool to gather all this information. Wyoming is going to have all that, have a placeholder for that, a staging area in Una Grants, formerly Ample Funded. Folks are familiar with that. And we're going to take all this input, we're going to review it, and then pass it on to NTIA. And so we're going to talk about this Appiate package. That's an NTIA tool. I'll show you that link there. That's going to be very helpful for you guys on the front end. When we looked at the latter part of the questionnaire and the rights of way and permitting, especially at the federal, state, and local level, NTIA put together a free mapping tool based on public available data that will help you assess the specific area that you're planning to build in and the impacts and who you need to go talk to. So that's a very cool tool. The ESAPT, again, is WBO's tool for talking to NTIA. On the webinar, we showed you how that was going to translate into Una Grants. And so we'll tie that all together. This EHP questionnaire, we want you thinking early about, especially on the federal side. If you're crossing federal land, can be a longer process. And so making sure that you have that in place. But then as we start working through here, we'll see that we've got having the NEPA experts, again, ties back to the questionnaire. But this is where I wanted to get to. So this first major deliverable is detailed project description that covers all environmental aspects. It's very similar to we've asked you guys for a revised summary project description. You may remember. Some have delivered that, some are waiting, but that's fine. That summary project description, we're going to share that with NTIA, and they're going to bulk upload all of those into the ESAP to create a project shell. And then they're going to use that to initiate the nation-to-nation tribal notification. So taking that summary project description and enhancing it with all the supporting documentation is that next step. And we've got a link in the PowerPoint that Bridget's going to share from NTIA about specific guidance about what's required for that. And then, so when you're going through here and pulling that together, this section right here, submit all data required for the screening questions is important, but this section right here, as you go into Amplifund and start uploading these things, there's going to be a categorical exclusion screening question fillable form. And I'm going to walk you through that also. It is directly from the ESAP. And so we've replicated that in Grants. And so as you upload the description and the maps, we're also going to want you to go through the categorical screening questions and answer those, because that's going to help us assess which categorical exclusions are on the table and off the table. And I'm going to walk you through that. And I'm also going to show you a link directly from NTIA that we built this from. So everything is specifically intentional here. And I don't want any translation errors. So I use the exact same language that NTIA used. We actually mirrored the ESAP in the Amplifund tool so that we don't have any translation errors or confusions. A key thing, though, is that, and I think I said this on the webinar, there is no self-determination. You may think a categorical exclusion applies. That's great. You've got to answer all the questions, provide all the information to WBO so that we can assess and then pass it along to NTIA for the final determination. So don't assume something. Give us all the information we need. Don't give us more than we need, because I don't have a placeholder for it. I mentioned that on the call too. Again, this is intentional. So as you're going through and answering all these questions, it's because that's the specific question NTIA is asking of Chad. So Chad needs to get that from you, and then that's the path. And if you give us extra stuff, it actually makes it confusing. If you don't give us enough, we can't move forward. So that's the kind of dance we're going to be in here. So this first section, when you talk about your project description and supporting documentation, is our first screening pass on the categorical exclusions, or CatExes. Then we're going to take a detailed pass on what are called extraordinary circumstances. And so we're going to go through here, and again, you need to answer in the affirmative, or in the Amplifund system that no. We want an answer for the no too. This is not a check the box exercise where you go through and just say no, 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 and move on. If you've said no to something, that Fish and Wildlife's IPAC system, you got to tell us why it's a no and show the supporting documentation. So make sure that I want to have as little curing as possible, because that's inefficient. So the better you guys fill this stuff up front is going to be a cleaner process for you. And time is money. And anytime you get cured, you kind of go back to the queue. When you're pulling this stuff together, if you're engaging with SHPOs and you don't give them what they need, it's a 30-day clock. If you've given them something and it's not what they need, the clock starts again. So you can really waste a ton of time if you're not efficient. And that's where the subject matter expertise that we mentioned with those SOI qualified folks that have been through this before will be extremely helpful. So this maps out the deliverables that we need you to be gathering, and it's kind of your checklist. Again, you're not going to turn this one in for us. This one is just basically your guide to navigate the process. So if you are going through this checklist and you have all this information, it can be your checklist to help you enter stuff into the Amplifund tool, the Grants, and making sure that you're providing everything. I'm going to stop sharing here. First of all, I'll open it up for questions here before I walk through the categorical Exclusion Screening Questionnaire. Any questions out there? I know I'm covering a lot.
We got one, where can the BEAD EHP task list be found?
Is that on their website, or do you guys email it out? I forgot.
Yeah, so that will be hyperlinked in this document, but it will be on the, if it isn't already, be on the BEAD resources page where the other items are
And
on
again,
Wyoming's website.
this isn't new content. All we've done is take the EHP guide and make it operational, turned it into a task list. So the topics are all the same. I'm going to stop sharing here so I can go find the next resource I want to walk through.
Tim, we did get one other question just while you're grabbing that. It says, can we get an example of not too much information, but not too little?
So when I say not too much information or not too little, we've asked specific questions in Amplifund. Answer those questions completely. Don't give us answers to questions we didn't ask for or supporting documentation for stuff we didn't ask for, but make sure you give us supporting documentation for everything we have asked for. No questions can be left blank. Every question is applicable, even if it's a no, but we still need you to affirm that. So when I say answer all the questions completely, give us the appropriate supporting document, but don't give us extra stuff. Thinking you're helpful because there's no place for us to put it in the NTIA system, and NTIA is not going to look at it anyway. So stay on point and just answer the questions. It's like a Law and Order episode. Only answer what's asked. So I mentioned that when you guys enter the project description and supporting maps, etc., that there's going to be a downloadable fillable form that we want you to complete that based on that project description and maps, etc. And so this is directly pulled from NTIA's ESAP tool. This is what we're going to use to evaluate. And so the first section is talking about construction, if it's buried or aerial. One thing that's really important here, and it goes back to that summary project description that is going to be the base for your more detailed project description, is it's very important for us to understand if you are doing a complete new build versus you are leveraging existing conduit and already disturbed rights of way. If you don't share that information, we can't find the happy path of a CatEx. But as a general statement, if you are putting fiber on existing poles that won't require any ground disturbing activity, or you are pulling fiber through existing conduit that doesn't have any ground disturbing activity, that's very likely to qualify for a categorical exclusion and more quickly get approved. Now, if that is part of a broader project where there's other stuff going on, it's a zero-sum game, and that goes back to what I was talking about on the webinar with like independent utility versus connected actions. But if you've got a NEPA project area that is singular task and it's pulling conduit through pulling fiber through existing conduit on previously disturbed land, when you start filling this out, that's going to really provide a lot of good information for NTIA to say, you know what, CatEx applies to this and we can clear this without anything else. If we see that there are ground disturbing, then that's going to lead us to those extraordinary circumstances. Again, you still have to, you can't determine, I'm only going to fill out the categorical exclusion questions and I've already determined that that's all that factors. You still need to go through all the extraordinary circumstances, that due diligence to prove the fact. And that's where I was saying that if you don't do that, if you just uploaded your project description, filled out the CatEx exclusions and said, I'm good to go, this is existing conduit, you're not good to go. You still need to go through all the other steps to prove that's the case. So that's where I'm talking about of answering all the questions completely Don't skip anything. Go through these screening questions. It's a two-pass process to give NTIA the confidence that they understand what the project is and can approve it as is. So these are all going to be drop downs, and you're gonna select. So this area is talking about construction of buried and aerial telecommunication lines. So section 1. Section 2 is talking about newer existing communication systems. Section 3 gets into a lot more complexity. So you're going to find that if 1 and 2 apply, but 3 doesn't, it'll be pretty fast. If 3 applies, there's a lot of stuff with 3. And so this gets in all the detail here. And so pretty much every scenario that's out there is covered here. And again, as you answer these, this will help determine which categorical exclusions are on the table and which ones by default are no longer on the table, and will then inform the extraordinary circumstances screening we do after the fact, which were that second part of the checklist where the IPAC and the SHPO and all those details. Any questions there?
Yeah, we did get one, Tim. Are there any procurement requirements for subgrantee if we hire a third party?
So when it comes to, you can't do any ground disturbing activity prior to full EHP clearance from NTIA. But the BEAD terms and conditions do allow for procurement. They allow for planning. So there are non-ground disturbing activities that are allowed to happen, and those are spelled out in your subgrantee agreement. So yes, procurement is on the table. The key though is, and I think we used this example in the webinar, if you've already got an existing warehouse to store stuff, great. But if you're expecting, you've got an open field outside your facility and you're going to lay some gravel on that to store stuff, that's ground disturbing. So again, ask questions before you do things. The equipment purchase may be fine, but the storage of that equipment could be problematic if you are doing some ground disturbing. All right, I'm going to switch gears then and go over to the Appiate tool, which is NTIA's permitting. All right, I found it. Everybody see this? Yeah, great. So this is the landing page. But what's interesting here is we've got federal and tribal lands, we've got state lands, infrastructure right-of-ways, some programs, floodplains. So these topic areas should be familiar, because if we think back to the EHP questionnaire, these were topic areas there for you to start considering. And then you look at the EHP task list, some topic areas there. So let's So we'll see here, you can start scrolling in and you can see areas, and it's got information about them. So on the federal land side, and you come over here, you can toggle things on and off. So federal, there's a lot of action going on with that one right there. So this is based on Esri's mapping system. So if you've got GIS folks that can help you navigate, but it's all publicly available. So you can scroll into or zoom into the area of your project area and look at it through a federal tribal lands lens. You can look at it from unfortunately, it doesn't port over, so every tab is independent. So we can get in here and we can see state lands, Let's expand this out. And then there's infrastructure. That one you need to have a license for. Forgot about that. So again, this is not a deliverable. This is just a resource that can help you during your planning, and looking through and seeing if things are going to be impacted, and whether or not you need a permit, and who you can talk to, critical habitat, historic places. So just another resource to help you navigate. And then we've got share again. This is a link that's included. So we talked about the project descriptions and maps. So hugely important. And ESAC project description. Here's a good example: installing 58 miles of buried fiber optic cable in previously disturbed existing road right of way along this stretch of land here. So who's impacted, what's being built, how it's being built, and those interesting facts about it, like existing rights of way, similar for the towers here. So and then we've got, when it comes to the more detailed, you kind of build it out a little bit. And so this resource will help you navigate both the summary project description to get things off the ground. Again, that summary project description is predominantly to build the project record shell in the ESAP tool, and then allows NTIA to jumpstart that nation-to-nation tribal notification. And one thing that's important there, you may think, I don't have any tribal activity in my project area, but that doesn't mean that they can't be notified as far as when you think about migration patterns and stuff like that. And so there may be an interest. And so that's something for NTIA to navigate. If there is an expressed interest, NTIA will reach out to Wyoming, and then we'll share that with the impacted ISPs. But again, these are important. There's no self-determining here. You can't say this doesn't apply to me. Answer these questions, provide this detail. The better you do on the front end of all these deliverables, the more efficient your review process is going to be, and likely the faster path to approval. There are no corner cutting. There is no corner cutting here. So this is a good resource here. It's got a lot of examples, types of maps we're looking for to provide the NTIA. When you think about, like, if you've got part of the route is aerial, part of the route is buried, distinguishing that. If part of that buried is new and part of it is existing content, differentiate all those things on the map. Because if you don't, it's going to get kicked back. Because I know I worked at NTIA for 13 years. I know all the folks in the environmental shop. I know the questions they're going to ask. And if you send a map in that doesn't have that breakout, it's not going to meet the expectations. And it's just going to, again, anytime we need to cure, it just adds time. So doing it better up front, and again, leveraging those SOI qualified folks, it makes that a lot easier. But this is a very good resource for you. And then I'll just show you one more thing real quick here to show
While
you.
you're looking for that, Tim, I'll just answer a couple questions. There was one about, is this form available outside of Amplify? And yes, it will be on the website. And then when should we expect to see our unit access? After the agreements are executed, you should all be receiving unit access.
And that's a great question, because in advance of unit access, the categorical exclusions, this link right here, which is the, and it's going to be in the PowerPoint, this frequently asked questions from June 2025, this is what we based Amplifund off of. So these are specific screenshots from ESAPT that we built the whole thing on. And again, it's word for word. Numbering's the same. It's a mirror of this. So if you want to get familiar with this in advance, this isn't going to have the great drop downs because it's just a screenshot, but these are all the questions that we saw in the categorical exclusion. And these are all the deliverables on the extraordinary circumstances. You're going to see this is going to tie one-to-one with that EHP checklist. So you have the resources available to get familiar with this stuff. It's going to take you time to gather all this, but this is why we have that, because these are the specific deliverables that Chad needs to give the NTIA. And so the best way to get those is to ask them the exact same way from you guys. And so there are no questions that can't be answered. You have to answer every one, and you need to provide the supporting detail to justify. And I think that's all the resources I had to walk through. So I'll stop sharing and I'll see if there are any more questions. I think I mentioned on the webinar, those of you that had experience with Treasury's CPF program, it's a very different experience for NTIA BEAD. Treasury and NTIA take polar opposite approaches. And so where the ISP was empowered to do stuff, you're not empowered to do anything. You're empowered, you're required to do all the legwork, but you're not empowered on any decision making. NTIA has made Wyoming the joint lead. So that means that they basically did that to help them scale. And so the ISPs are going to gather all what I call the EHP package. And so all those things in the EHP task list, it's your responsibility to go out and gather all that information. Do not expect that Wyoming is going to manage those deliverables for you. You get those deliverables, you upload them into Amplifund, and WBO is responsible then for receiving, reviewing, assessing, curing if necessary, and then once they are in agreement that this is a clean package, they will then work with NTIA to get that approved. One good thing, the way this works, it's not a zero-sum game. I forgot the number, but there's 20-odd deliverables. They're independent deliverables. So if you're dealing with a SHPO, you provide that SHPO information. We can review and cure that and kind of knock that one off the list. That's independent from Fish and Wildlife's IPAC system. It's independent from coastal zoning. So we're going to knock those out. We're not going to wait until you submit everything and then start our review, because that would be inefficient. So as you are submitting things, as things become available and you are confident that they are in good shape, you can submit them and we will review them and we can kind of check them off the list. And then once all the deliverables are received, validated, and approved by WBO, that's when the package will go to NTIA. So there are some efficiencies we're looking there. On average, CatExes take 3 to 6 months. NTIA is hopeful that with the ESAPT and some of the other efficiencies that they've added to the program with actually leveraging a lot more CatExes than have in past programs and coordination with other federal agencies, we're hopeful it's going to be faster, but it's all dependent on the quality of deliverables. And so again, making sure that you go through these checklists, that when you're entering, you answer every question, you provide the supporting documentation. We're available if you have questions to help you navigate, but again, it's your job to complete the deliverables.
Thanks, Tim. I haven't seen any more questions come through, but again, the documents that Tim reviewed today, they will be posted onto our website probably by end of day. It's like we had another question come through. Once we sign the contract, what starts the 4-year clock? The CatEx or the contract?
Contract. That's why this is challenging, because if you don't, you're eating into your period of performance with this stuff here. And so in past programs, I'm hopeful that we can do this more quickly, but your period of performance is contract start date, contract end date. And however long EHP, you can't start that ground disturbing until there's other things you can do, but do not start that ground disturbing until you've got the full approval. That was one of the challenges we had. So my first job at NTIA, I was a federal program officer for BTOP, the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program. And that's where I cut my teeth on EHP. We had so many route changes going on that basically the program came to a stop. And there was nothing going on and so we had to create an efficient process. Basically, some of the processes that are still in place at NTIA today to help navigate this stuff. So it can be problematic if you start early.
Thanks, Tim. I'm not seeing any more questions right now. But if there are any more questions, feel free to reach out to me, and we will work to get those answered. As to where the forms will be posted, I will put the link in the chat right now. It will be in the Wyoming Business Council BEAD page under the grant application. And I just posted the link in the chat for everyone to see. That's where the docs have been posted and will be posted. All right. I guess with that, as I said before, any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly and I'll work to get you an answer. And then Bridget, when is our next webinar scheduled? Do you know off the top of your head?
I do not have it off the top of my head. I
Okay.
can follow up, but yeah, I can't see it. My Teams is a little frozen right now. But
Okay.
I know that for sure we definitely have. I know just since a couple people touched on UNA today, we did have like the preliminary overview webinar, but we are planning to have a more specific, thorough walkthrough of the forms that'll be set up in there, the reporting and everything else. So that'll be closer to, that'll probably be early June. But we will definitely have that. So once you have the portal, we will have an additional webinar for you to go back through and I'm sure have more specific questions.
Thanks, Bridget. It looks like we did get we did receive another question. If a subgrantee submits a preferred alignment and later needs minor field adjustments to avoid a resource, what kind of changes can stay within the original package and what triggers a resubmittal?
Great question. There will be route changes. Any scope change means you stop and come back and ask what you do next. It'll require an updated project description, maps, etc. If, for example, if NTIA, if we determine that the impact is within the same impacted area, it could be just stays within the CatEx and you move forward. If it's outside of that, it could require more detail. So it's going to be project specific, but the point is if you have a scope change, stop what you're doing, come back to WBO and ask what to do next. You're going to likely be asked to provide an updated project description with associated supporting documents and maps, etc. And then the Q&A will happen to help us dig into what that is. I've got some route changes with some of our middle mile clients, and they go through a mini review. Like the requirements don't change. Hopefully we can do it quicker, but you don't want to move forward without checking first.
And I'm willing to leave this open for another 12 minutes or so if there are any other questions that come in. We'll give it just another minute to see if we do receive any more questions. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up early, but I'll give it another minute to see if there are any outstanding questions.
One thing that may be helpful, so, and again, reinforcing that SOI qualified support staff, there is a program comment from I forgot the abbreviation, but basically you can go to SHPOs and start that whole process, or there's a program comment that if you have a qualified SOI person, they can go through and fill this out and offer some efficiencies because they're going to go check out data. They're going to do a lot of what the SHPO would have done to help you clear it. So that's an efficiency you can take advantage of, not as a DIY layperson, but if you have an SOI qualified person at your disposal, that can speed up the SHPO review process. So keep that in mind. Go back to look at the webinar slide deck. There's a section about that.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. With that being said, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. And again, this webinar will be posted to our website along with the EHP documents that Tim shared. And again, in the meantime, please feel free to reach out with any questions and we will get those answered. Have a great rest of the day, everyone, and we'll all talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you.